This is Air Studios, Lyndhurst Hall in northwest London. With artists such as Led Zeppelin, The Stones, Bowie and Kanye West having recorded within these historic Gothic walls, Air Studios has been at the forefront of high-end music production for over 40 years. Now with their new division, Air Mastering, they find themselves moving to a whole new world of para-audio. Loop TV spend the day with audio voyant and the master of the disc, Ray Staff, to try and explain some of the secrets that lay within. My name is Lawrence Traverso, and this is The Dark Arts. What exactly is mastering?
I think it's easier to look back at history a little bit, and mastering really was an evolution. When I started, there weren't mastering engineers per se, they were disc cutting engineers. You were given the final studio tapes, analog tapes from the studio, and you had to transfer that from tape to vinyl to be manufactured. So you was actually changing the actual format of which it's recorded in, so the recording medium made it sound different. It had different limitations. Some things could be recorded on vinyl well and others couldn't. And it was a matter of adjusting the sound and the levels, etc., to optimise it as a vinyl record. Then CD came along, and CD gave us another series of quality issues about how to get the best result out of that digital medium. And obviously in the early days the digital equipment maybe wasn't as good, well certainly wasn't as good as it is today, so we were working with a new system. It didn't have the specification that it does today, so it wasn't as good as it should be.
There's discussions about the volume wars and every record is trying to be louder than the next on the radio stations and on the record as well, so that you don't get lost in the plethora of records that are being released. Do you get a lot of that, or?
Yeah. The level war is really slightly out of control. There is that you can only go so loud in digital. You have only so much headroom. We are actually at the limit of where we can go, and I think a lot of people don't understand that it's not just a matter of turning the level up. What makes a record sound loud is not necessarily just turning up the volume. It's a matter of actually the quality of the audio, maybe the brightness and the character of the sound can make things sound loud and more energetic, and it's learning to manipulate those different areas in a recording. So you're listening to the original master that comes in from the studio, and you're trying to pick out those things that maybe make it sound loud, more present, or will give it more impact. And that's before you even start thinking about trying to make the record loud, and add anything, maybe limiting or compression. And things can be over-compressed because when you limit very heavily a piece of music, steps, you're pushing the level back down, and so it can actually make things sound quieter, not louder.
Pulling it back in, so potentially you can push the volume up, isn't it? So they suck it back down so that you're not getting the...
But it can be more damaging than leaving it alone.
Well, you lose your dynamic for a start.
Yeah, but people often don't listen to the results in a comparable way. They just because you may limit by whatever, say 6 dB, and maybe you can bring up the level 6 dB. It may be 6 dB louder, but actually, if you marry the two up in level and you do a proper comparison, then you can hear the damage that's being done.
Looking at commercial music, it seems like clipping is becoming almost out there in the public domain permanently, where we've got commercial records that are going out and using it as an effect. What do you think about that? I mean, is it becoming standard? Is it what's going on with that?
Yeah, it's the norm. Most things are very heavily limited or compressed or overdriven to try to give them volume and impact. But I think you have to take it to look in two ways. That distortion sometimes is applicable to a piece of music. Something needs that distortion, it needs that edge, it needs that bite. And I think what we're doing is we're trying to, you have to learn to use distortion sometimes creatively, but it doesn't mean to say, it could be like the distortion added to a guitar. It gives you that edge that makes the guitar sound good. But there's very different application, obviously, than if you're taking a final stereo mix and saying, well, I'm going to drive it into clipping until maybe it's just on the verge of distortion. But yeah, everything is right on the edge out there, and there's always the danger that it might sound good on a decent hi-fi or a decent CD player, but it doesn't mean to say it's going to sound clean or good on a cheaper or domestic system. And of course, there's always a question mark on how it's going to sound if it's converted into an MP3 or an AAC or whatever kind of file for listening to on a hit MP3 player or something like that. It can become progressively worse, so that you're right on the edge of distortion, and it gets progressively worse. So by the end of the day, when someone's listening to it, it can actually be quite painful, and it's knowing how far to actually push it, and it's very dangerous.
So what have we learnt from our visit to air mastering? Firstly, that mastering is an evolution and will continue to grow and change, as will the delivery of music throughout time. In that battle between loudness and dynamic, loudness is not always what it seems. Pumping the compressor can do the opposite of what you intend, so leave some headroom for your mastering engineer. I can't help wondering whether the art of mastering is quite as dark as it first appears. Or is it?